The government's announcements on the end of scanning and vaccine pass requirements, the removal of some vaccine mandates, and the erasing of some gathering limits is being welcomed by many in the business sector. From this weekend, there will be no outdoor gathering limits, but indoor limits under RED are set at 200. But the government has made it clear businesses can still use vaccine passports against their workers if they want to. So what are your rights? Well, employment relations expert Max Whitehead is with me on this. Good evening, Max.
Good evening, Chris. It's a big one because really this government has been encouraging employers to have the no jab, no job policy in their contracts for a long time. You know what? Guess what, Chris? I've actually I've submitted 2 applications to the Employment Relations Authority this week, suing employers for actually having dismissing people for unreasonable reasons. And look, this government's even encouraging it, which is a shame because they're really setting up employers to fail.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Max, because one of my final questions was going to be these government policies. This sets a divisive employment culture, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, that's always been the criticism of this government. They really are letting down the employee-employer relationship here. Look, there's no reason now. The High Court made a decision way back in time, but there's no reason now for these mandates to be in place. There's no justification for an employer then for now to dismiss anybody. And for the government to encourage it, I think it's absolutely, it's outrageous because these poor employers are now following the leadership of our Prime Minister and then going to fall cropper eventually. Now, that's a real shame.
Max Whitehead, where does this leave employees who were dismissed? Can they now demand their jobs back?
Well, that's a good question. Now, going back in time, there was justification in terminating their employment. For example, if they were during Delta, it was said that a person unvaccinated presented more of a risk. Now we've got Omicron, that's no longer exists. So possibly when they were dismissed at the time, there may have been justification. Whereupon, as soon as Omicron came on and the rules came out, the High Court made its decision, hey, they don't present any greater risk. The employer should look at reinstating them. Now, an employee is struggling. The judiciary cannot sort of retrospectively go back and say, okay, it's 2 months later or a month later, you could be justified. So there is a struggle here. So the only things that employees can take an action against their employer if there was an unreasonable process, and they could possibly go in now and apply for a job. And if they're not recruited reasonably, we can actually take an action on that basis. There could be some area of discrimination based on their physical well-being.
Max, what about employers, including the police, who still have this no jab, no job policy?
Well, look, again, this government's let them down because what they're telling the police always had a policy in place, no jab, no job. And now it's still in place. And of course, now the High Court said the mandate was removed. And I can't believe the government have just ignored the High Court's order. And as of yesterday said, oh, by the way, we're removing the mandate. Well, it was moved weeks ago. And I just can't believe this government encourages citizens out there to ignore the court's actions and the court's order. It's just absolutely crazy. But also they're saying to the employers, hey, you can keep your policy. You can still dismiss on that basis. And again, if that happens, people like me will be representing employees suing these employers. And because really they're getting poor advice.
Interesting point you make, Max, because I thought if you have a policy or you legislate for or against something, it's either enshrined in law or it isn't. It seems like when the Prime Minister made her statement, it was, we're getting rid of mandates, but if you still want to use them, go for gold. To me, I mean, is that even legal?
Yeah, well, let me explain. So what happens when the government produces a mandate, it's a law. So there is teeth, and employees cannot challenge it. But when an employer has a policy which ends up in a dismissal, the obligation of the employment judiciary is to review that policy to see if it was fair and reasonable in the first place. And they scrutinize them very, very closely. And that's where the police mandate right now, the police policy, which introduces no jab, no job, could be contested. And that goes right through all the other government departments that have had their mandates removed by the government now. Any policy they've got in place now can be tested and would be tested. I can't believe just one of the government departments recently that they dismissed something like 200 people, and that was only when the Omicron issue was out. But following the mandate, which has now been released, that government department should at least offer all these people their jobs back again.
Max, many small business owners who survived will now be apprehensive. What's the future for small businesses, do you think, as a result of the mandates and now the relaxing of some of them?
I'm going to be frank here, and look, it's not nice. This government have let down small businesses immensely. They really, really have. The trust and confidence in the government is really at a low, an absolute low. Now, the trust and confidence in the ability to run a business and to do it viably is now really, they're apprehensive that the government's not going to swing and take a jibe at them again. So I've got to say, where the future lies, there's apprehension. There's apprehension right through our whole society, Chris. I tell you what, I hope the Prime Minister's listening to this, or members of the government, for goodness sake, go out there and inject some confidence into people, because right now all the fear you've injected is really still manifesting itself. So we want the government to say to people, go back, use the small businesses, shop locally, get small businesses going again. It's going to help our economy, and it's going to help people get back on their feet again. But what you mentioned before, is the Prime Minister saying yesterday, oh, by the way, you can still have a policy, is really just demonstrating to me my point. This government are really looking for trouble, and it's not going to be healthy for our society.
Max, what impact does the High Court decision have now on police mandates? I mean, are they gone?
Yeah, well, yes, they had gone because the High Court had the powers to remove them, and they were gone about a month ago. And it was just strange yesterday that the Prime Minister says, and by the way, we're removing the mandate for police. Well, they were gone. She's actually telling the public, ignore the judiciary. They don't know what they're doing, and we do. Well, that's not actually correct. The High Court had the power to remove those particular mandates, and they did, and it was gone. I just can't believe this irresponsible government are actually now saying, hey, ignore court decisions, because really that really is causing havoc in our society.
Max, how long after dismissal can an employee raise an action claiming unjustified dismissal?
And that's really a big question right now, because if someone was dismissed like months ago and now wants to take an action, so the question's good. Now, the answer to that question is 90 days. 90 days is all they've got upon when the dismissal occurred until what action they can take. So if they could claim a disadvantage action against employers if they're still employed and something's happened to them, they've been disadvantaged. And many employees are going through that at the moment. They're not vaccinated, but their employer is discriminating against them. Those people could take an action against their employer, but anyone dismissed, it's going to be difficult. 90 days is the limit, Chris.
I saw a press release out, Max, just finally from the Christchurch City Council saying they're going to be considering what they do next when it comes to mandates, when it comes to vaccine mandates, passports, those types of things. That's got the backup. Many ratepayers saying, hang on, the government said this, what are you doing? But effectively, councils can decide on their own fate, can't they?
Well, Chris,
or can they?
I've just
or can
lost
they?
you. I think, yeah, no, yeah. I mean, the council can do what it likes, but if it's lawful or not, we're going to find out. Because I would suggest there's many people in Christchurch that are qualified and able, better than I am, to take an action against the council, and I would encourage them to do so. Because with that sort of attitude, people have been dismissed unreasonably, unjustifiably. And look, it's not fair on any citizen to be unjustifiably dismissed, particularly government people who trusted their government, their council, and had an employment where they thought they were quite safe and secure.
Employment relations expert Max Whitehead, thanks so much for your time this evening.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity. It was good to talk to you.